Hey, everybody, this is Vera Sadler with VLS Coaching Services, and I am here tonight with my friend LJ, and we are going to have a cool and great conversation, one that is much needed, something that we don't talk about a lot, something that I think some people may consider a taboo or just something they keep quiet a lot, Miss L. So I am so excited to have you here tonight to talk about this topic, which is divorced moms and being a single mom and just overcoming. I think we're always ready to jump on the bandwagon about all the negativity. But I am so excited tonight after talking to you, hearing some about your story, meeting you. First of all, meeting you was such a pleasure. That smile you had it the whole time when we met last
Yeah.
year. And yes, every time I see you, even when you're doing your talks and your shorts, you're always smiling. So I think that speaks to how what you're going to talk about, how it really is authentic. And so
Yeah.
when I heard about, you were talking about some things you had going on, I thought, wow, she would be a great guest to come on and talk to and share because I feel like you said, the topic, I wish somebody had shared some of the things that with me when I was a young woman and going through some of the same issues. But
Okay.
I'm going to step back and we're going to have this conversation. But I want you to take time and introduce yourself to our listening audience.
Yes. Thank you so much, Vera. Yes, I am LJ. I go by L. And what's going on for me is I um I was married for nearly 20 years and I had to get a divorce. I did not want it at all. But it happened. And
Mhm.
um I was raised by two parents who remained married. So that's what I knew. And that was my goal to strive for. My parents had their own struggles in their marriage. So I was like, okay, I'm going to get married and I'm show them how to have a successful marriage without all this drama and things like that. And because my parents, they had, my mom had 8 children, and with my dad, and then my dad made some additional choices, and had some additional children. So we kind of had like an Old Testament household, is what I like to call it. And because I mean, it's not anything new. But for so much time, I thought I was ashamed of my family of origin because I was really, as one of the oldest, and being the oldest female, I was like, yes, this is Leave It to Beaver, Huxtable kind of family. I am a successful student, top 10%, voted most likely to succeed, all of these things. So
Mhm.
my mom taught us about Jesus Christ and what it was to have a relationship with him. And then for everything to turn the way it did, led me to just kind of be like, what in the world did my parents just do to my life? And so I was just like, nope, when I get married, I am not going to have a life like that. I want to show my parents that you can get married and not have all this drama. And the two adults could be married partners because it wasn't a partnership. It was my
Mhm.
dad, being the one with his foot on my mom, figuratively and sometimes not literally,
Before
but
you
the
keep
emotions.
going, because
Yep.
I don't want to forget what I want to ask you, but you said something that's very important. And as a Bible believing Christian woman myself who loves the Lord with her whole heart, but you said something that's very crucial that we miss that we do to our children, and that
Yes.
happens to us in a Christian home, is
Yes.
that if we don't really see the word lived out,
Yes.
because you
Yeah.
said they taught you and they taught you about the love of Jesus, but you're seeing these two adults at your home and you thought, well, I don't want to be like that. So what I heard clearly from you is that parents, you also have to be mindful that you're not just teaching the word, but you're
You're living
living the
it.
word because it gave you something, it left a bitter taste in your mouth.
Yes. A bitter taste that actually led me to be prideful, and my actions
Wow.
were, they didn't have the motive of growth and love. They were a motive of, I'm going to prove to you kind of thing. And it
Mhm.
was it was pride. And and the Lord, his word really does come true. Like, he's, when he said pride comes before a fall, um, however the fall comes or whenever it comes, not saying that, um, it's really hard to split that, like really make what I'm about to say, like not making God seem like he's a vindictive God, because he's not. He's a God of relationship. He's a God of, like, when
Oh,
I
I
say,
get you, sister.
you know, so, but for all those people that are out
That
there
don't. Right.
that don't understand that relational aspect of God, I really want to make sure to say that God is not vindictive. He's just like,
Mhm.
hey, I set these things in order. And it's just kind of how it happens. It's like cause and effect. I love science, by the way. So that's something else about me. So as I'm talking, I'm going to use like some scientific stuff, because my dad, he was a medical professional. My mom was a homemaker, and they both, um, had trauma in their
Mm.
lives that was not addressed. And because it
Mhm.
was not addressed, that is also what led them to live a particular way that impacted me.
Yes.
Um, so at first, I was blaming them for, like, I'm getting a divorce because you guys didn't show me what it was to have a healthy marriage, and it's your fault that my life is going this way. Um, and I felt so angry, um, and just frustrated, but I didn't really know how to express myself, because in my family of origin, feelings were taboo. You
Or
better not
expressing them.
expressing them, right. So we could laugh and we could be happy as the children. But the parents, they could have a wider range of expressing of emotions, but we couldn't. So I didn't know what emotions were, definitions of them, how to express them, kinds of things. And that was difficult. That was difficult in and of itself. So
Wow.
that's kind of a little bit about me. So in having that 20-year marriage, replicating some behaviors that I saw in my mother do, um, coming from a place where the husband was the head, so the wife needed to submit, to the husband. I did those things to the point where I thought I was entering the marriage as a partnership, but I ended up being like hiding and just minimizing myself, because my husband at the time, I was like, okay, we made this agreement. Like, he would get his doctorate and we would move for his professional development and career advancement. And then after a particular time, I would be able to do my thing and advance, myself. But that never happened. Um, and I trusted him and shared so much of like my wounds and my traumas from my family of origin. And he said some things like, oh, well, your family does depend on you a lot, so you can stand up. And he like made this like, your family's depending on you like this, so if you stand up, then they have a choice to make. So I was like, okay, cool. That sounds good. That was a nice little image. Well, I stood up and we got together. And then in the marriage, I ended up like this, and I couldn't do this because he was like, no, you got to stay right here. Something happened there, right? So, and I don't want to bash him by any means. It was me. It was what I was not aware of that I
Mm. That's
allowed
good.
to
Mhm.
happen. And who wants to sit here and say it was me, as I was also, I had a part to
Because
play.
usually we're doing like this.
Yes,
Usually we're pointing the
yes,
finger.
right. So in order for the person at that index finger, into that index finger, to do what they did, I had to allow something to happen. And it wasn't that I allowed it purposefully. I allowed it out of ignorance and out of what I knew. And because I did not have a community of people to bounce things
Mhm.
off of and get different perspectives, he was able, we were like, I stayed in that with what I knew, just stuck, right?
Wow. So you said a whole like mouthful in that descriptive of who you were, where you came from, your background. And there's so many things that you said that I need to ping back at you for just a minute, which was
Yes.
one, your background played a lot in it. And so your trauma plus how you grew up, you didn't even understand your parents' trauma. And sometimes when we come into things, we don't understand the trauma, the backstory. So here you have two people coming together, and maybe you learned your husband's trauma or whatever his backstory was after the fact.
Mhm.
So we have two. You have your trauma, your issues, your concerns, but your mindset or your way of thinking that wasn't really whole and healthy. So you had an
Right.
unhealthy way of thinking when you entered this relationship. You mentioned something, and I want to make sure our listening audience is not going to take out of context, because I know how sometimes just people are ping off one thing you said and they don't hear nothing else. When you said yes, and we're taught that the wife goes in and she's submissive, and we are to be submissive, but it never means be a doormat, and it never means. And I know from conversations with you how we've talked about this, that there are some people who take that submission, that, and because there has to be sometimes a mutual submission. Yes, he's the head and he's responsible for things in the home, but there's also a mutual submission in that relationship to how we love and how we care and how we concern for one another. And just I will tell you this, studying psychology as well. We've studied psychology, sociology. When you said something, one thing that came out to me immediately, or came to my mind immediately, when you're talking about how he addressed you about your family. Yeah, sure. And most spouses talk about, I talk to my spouse about things that go on with me, my family, and stuff. But it seemed like there was a little bit of, and you can answer this for me or not. Was there a little bit of isolation, separation, pulling you away from your family at all?
How'd you guess? All right. So it was also, again, as I said, it was also something that I allowed. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because of my experiences, I had an internship where one of my supervisors was like, hey, when my wife and I got married, we moved away from our family so that we could really and truly become one, so that we could do that leave and cleave. So I was like, okay, well, when I got married, I was like, okay, I think that sounds like a good idea because of how enmeshed I was in my own family, that I was like, okay, let's do that separation thing. So that is something that I desired, and he just latched onto it. Um, the thing that I didn't intend to happen was that we would move every 3 to 4 years. That was a lot of grief. It was a lot of separation. It was a lot of where, again, it was nearly 20 years, right? So every 3 to 4 years, you do that math. That's a lot of moving in that time period. So I'm finding new jobs, having to move my children and get them new doctors, new schools, all of these different things, get acclimated myself, get the home settled. Um, Lots of things, to where I end up getting to a place where I'm like, I do not want to get connected to a church. I don't want to find any friends because I'm just going to lose them anyway, because we're moving
Wow.
every 3 to 4 years. So that's why I'm saying it was a mixture of things that transpired that led to that isolation, to where I can't say, well, it was all him, you know. But when I began to notice, there was an instance where I'm like, hey, I'm in this job. I just got this promotion to being a manager and a sizable increase in salary. So I was like, hey, let me just stay here for 6 more months and get um, experience here in this manager position. And I didn't get a very favorable reaction to that. And so, which triggered me to react like my mom reacted, which was
Mm.
to shrink and get timid and just go with it. But as I went with it, I was hot. I was mad. And I was so mad and in my emotions, I didn't even know I was pregnant again.
Wow.
And yeah, so and then with all those moves, I also had 3 miscarriages before I ever had a live birth. Didn't even get to grieve those fully at well, really at all until I got divorced. So there was a confluence of things that I've been through. Um, and you would think like, oh, how in the world are you smiling? um, I am smiling because of the relationship that I had with with both of my parents actually, because my mother had a strong relationship with God. My dad, he had a relationship with God, but the main thing that he gave me was a drive to always work, to
Hmm.
value education and to learn. Um, so that's what I do in all of the situations I'm in. I'm always learning. I'm always figuring out something. I'm thinking critically because that was another gift that my dad gave to me. My mom as well, because she made us teach Bible study. Like I'm a sixth grader. Listen, I'm a sixth grader and I'm teaching Bible, having a Bible study with people that are 70 and 80 years old. I am crying through that thing. So, yeah, because I anyway, just
But
lots of
all
it.
this stuff that you've gone through, and we're not going to stay at your divorce because we know it led to your a lot of things happen within the relationship that led to your divorce. But one of the big things we wanted to come to the talk to tonight was after the divorce, because so
Yes,
many women get there and they're stuck. They find
yes,
themselves in a place where you were single mom. Now you're now a single mom because you're single parenting, even though you guys probably were co-parenting. But even with after that, you get to a place where me and my children, it's no longer me, him, and the children, but it's me and my children and navigating a whole new life, a whole
yes,
new way of doing things. And I think it goes back to how you started out. And so I think that was important for people to hear that foundation, that even though the foundation was rocky, you said with their, I mean, your parents were together. So you didn't see two people not together. You saw parents together raising you and your brothers and your siblings together. So that was different. Now for you, it's like, okay, here I am, single mom. What am I to do? And the reason I wanted Elle to come on this show, for those that are joining us, those that are going to just popping in, maybe at this time they hear, I'm with LJ from LJ Enterprise Solutions, and she is talking to us about what being divorced and a single mom. And really, for me, it's recovery. It's recovery. It's but you have a different term for it. I know you do, and
yes,
I'm gonna let you give the term for it. But the reason I wanted you to come on and talk about this, because I think it's, and I think I told you this, it's so crucial at this hour and this day that people learn how to grow. You just said it. They learn. You say your dad taught you how to critically think. And if we don't learn this, Elle, what you were given by your father, we stay stuck in a place that we cannot bounce back from. So here you are,
yes.
divorced mom.
Divorced. So that whole process of getting to divorce, I had to have support to even get to a place to say it's necessary because I was trying to stay in it. Um,
Great point.
and yeah, yeah. So again, understanding my feelings, getting perspective and help from other people. I needed it. I was in the term need. We denigrate it and make it seem like, oh, why in the world should I need something? We do have times where we need something, right? So I had to shift my perspectives. I had to shift the words that I used
Wow.
and claim the power in words, right?
Yeah.
So and then shift from using words that would lead my mind in a place that it didn't need to go. So in this situation where I needed to get a divorce, instead of calling it a divorce, I called it a family restructure
Oh, good
because
term.
Yeah, the divorce, saying divorce has a negative connotation. It's like, oh, I got divorced. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, I don't need your pity and I don't need your sympathy. I wanted to just shout from the rooftops, like, yes, I am free from that marriage. Not necessarily the person, it was the marriage. I was in captivity. And as a
Mm.
child of God, he said that Jesus came to set me free, right? So why in the world would I stay in a relationship where I wasn't free?
Mm.
No. So I needed to get free. I was sad and hurt because that meant that our children were going to have, they were going to be children of divorce. I didn't want that for them. And I knew that they were going to have their own emotional struggles. I'm having my emotional struggles. I've never been married before. He had, but anyways, I'd never been married before, so I didn't know what I was doing. So, and divorce, so negative, so heavy. So, family restructure. And then I was reading books like Mom's House, Dad's House, and looking at it from that perspective and saying, telling my children, no, you're going to go to your dad's house or you're coming home with me. And then I had to think about it. Nope. Need to shift my perspective again and shift it from the standpoint of my children and tell my children, you are going to your home with your dad and you're coming to
Oh,
your home with me.
oh, this is so good, Elle.
Yeah.
That is so
Because
good.
it's that
That there,
whole,
oh man, I have to stop there. That
yeah,
alone will make a huge difference in a child's life, your life. Instead of taking, oh my gosh, you know how you just pull the rug out of some negativity for parents who and mothers who want to bash and be bitter about co-parenting? That
yeah,
just pulled the whole bitterness out of that. Like, oh, you got to go to your dad's house. No, you're going to your house. I love
yes.
it. I love it. Thank you for sharing that.
Yes, and I don't get me wrong, I definitely had feelings of um hatred, malice, lots of bitterness towards that person. But I had to recognize that not only was I a person who had wounds, they had wounds too.
Mhm.
That that led them to make the choices that they made. And that's why if I can give myself compassion and grace for making the choices rather than living in regret and woe is me and wanting people to feel sorry for me, feel sorry for myself, get pity rather than empathy and sympathy. Um, I needed to extend the same to their dad because I parents, both parents, need to be in the children's lives as long as both parents are safe for their children to be around. And he's safe for the children to be around. So there's no problem there. It's just me working out what I need to deal with
Your heart.
divorcing him. So that's why I'm like, I'm saying my audience is divorced single parents because there, if you had like those circles, being divorced, that's a circle in itself, and then it would overlap being a single parent. So and then kind of another circle with being single because as a person, you got needs. So um I'm not gonna lie about any of that. So all of these things play off of each other, which is why I'm saying I needed to shift my perspective to be about the children and put myself to the back, not to the back or to the side to a degree, and just say when it comes to the children, this is the focus, their homes. And then as a divorced person, say, okay, not only am I wounded, they're wounded too. So grace and mercy to them too. And just they're not my enemy, you know, taking that enemy mindset out of it. Um,
How
and
long
it,
did it
it
take you to really start getting there? Because, there's a lot of bitter, bitter people from relationships. And um and it takes two. We always hear it takes two to tango.
yes,
And I just applaud you for something you've done from the just starting out in this conversation is you owned that you were both part of this. You didn't
Yeah.
just say, "Oh, he did all these god awful horrible things to me and I had to leave." You said, I was part of this." So I think there are a lot of bitter people that are in have former relationships and they're not, because we're here talking about in your organization, LJ Enterprise Solutions, ministers and it teaches, it helps, it coaches. You're a life coach to
Yes.
those people who have, and a lot of people think they sometimes don't think they need our services. But I'm telling you, if they sit and they talk to us and they hear what we're talking about, it's one, our life experiences. But for you to be able to transition from that profound statement about the children to, hey, that's another human being. They need, if I'm one to have compassion, because they need compassion, but then also to elevate yourself from where you were in that. You still have people, elders, probably years later, still sitting there. Well, he did this to me, and I'm this, and sitting and cannot move.
Yes. So um, I've been divorced for 3 years. So um, this year, later on this year, it'll be 4. So I was very determined. Um, because as I said, that's what I got from my parents. Determination, perseverance, push, drive. Um, those are the gems, the diamonds that I mined out of my relationship with my parents. So in this 3-year time period, I have had to shift my mindset, shift, um, learn rather about what emotions are, and then recognize, oh, I'm in this emotion. A lot of times I would wallow in it and just kind of get stuck in the emotion sometimes, right? But thankfully, there are mental health professionals who
Yes, yes,
who definitely can help you. And I'm a very direct person. Um, so I also like people being direct with me. And I say, be direct with me. Don't worry about what I'm going to feel. They're my feelings. I need to hear it. And a lot of times I didn't want to. And there was some time where I kind of had some depression because I'm like, oh my gosh, this is heavy stuff. But it's almost like um, lifting weights and trying to lose a lot of weight all at once. It is a big thing to do to your body, right? So I've had this emotional exercising and emotional weight loss, to where I, instead of holding on to the bitterness, I went through it. I went through the anger, went through the frustration, went through the regret, went through the guilt, and the shame, and decided, no, I'm just a wounded person. So I also, like, again, on words, trauma. If you look at the root of that, in its wound, trauma is a wound.
yes,
And not to minimize trauma, but to know that it's a wound lets me know that it can be healed.
yes.
And if
Mm, so
something
good.
can be healed, so many times I hear people say, okay, you have all this trauma, and it will be with you for the rest of your life. There's some truth in that, because if you have a big enough wound, you'll have a scar, right? So, yeah, the scar will be with you and it will be a memory of that event that happened. But the open, festering wound that needs medication, time to heal, surgery, stitches, whatever it needs, it can be healed to form a scar. And I remember I was playing basketball in
That's
sixth
so
grade,
good.
and I got this huge scratch on my arm, and it was about that wide. But as I've grown, that scar has shrank. But I
Mm,
remember when I got it, but it doesn't hurt anymore because it's healed. That is the same with going through all of our emotions from events that are traumatic to us, right? So that's just what we've got to do. And I call them diamonds. right? So let's say I'm going through, and there was an instance with my dad where he did something to me that put me in the hospital. And for the longest time, anytime I talked about that event, I would cry and it would feel like I was present in that time period.
Moment. Mhm.
Then I had to determine within myself, like, I don't want to keep crying when I talk about this. And I began to process through those emotions and through those feelings to where I'm not crying about that anymore. Even just to say what I just said in the past would have brought tears to my eyes. But
Wow.
it was a traumatic event that I have shrunk, and it is a scar now, not a wound, not an open wound, not something that's unaddressed. So I had to dig deep, take off those unprocessed emotions, and pull out the diamond that I learned from that event.
Wow.
And
So go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, so and from that event, I'm like, oh, I don't have to, it's over now.
Mhm.
I can see. My dad apologized. Um I'm not in that. I'm not that person anymore. And I can move forward still. And it also meant that my former spouse could no longer push that button and trigger me.
Yes. Oh man, that's so good. And so you talked about a diamond. And we
Yes,
all know that when you mine for diamonds, as you said, it takes a lot of digging and a lot of work. And even if you find when you first find it, it's not in that pure form that we run around here on our rings on our fingers or in our ears. It's not in that form.
right.
It takes that work of pressing, processing. And that's what I just thought about when you were talking about you said those gems and diamonds. And I'm sure your parents probably love those illustrations that you use, that the things that you learn from them, the diamonds and the gems, but to turn that around, I think so many people, I hate to say it this way, but so many people are still stuck where everything's just like coal and fire, brimstone, coal, nothing. They've not gotten the gem and they've not learned any lessons, or they've let the negative fire burn so long that they can't go down. And because when fire burns something, it's supposed to produce something else, what's the
Yes,
good part of it, and get off all the dross and all the other impurities. And
right.
not saying that we want to go through trauma and drama, but what you're talking about is saying, I've been through this, so can I go? I've already been through that part of the fire, but can I do the work that now sharpens me as an individual and find me the jewel? And that is so precious. But I find, there's not everybody that's going to do that work. But
No,
if they're listening to this broadcast, I hope they realize what you said. It takes
yes, it
your work to do
definitely
it.
does.
Mhm.
And a lot, like, as I say, I talk about diamonds in the way that I coach and speak about making it through um, divorce, being a divorced single parent,
Mhm.
to where we can walk in our power that we have, so that we can empower our children and future generations. That's what LJ Enterprise Solutions is about. It's divorced single parents walking in their power, therefore empowering their children for the future, right? So, diamonds, right? Okay, let's talk about diamonds. As I said, I love science. So, diamonds are actually formed really, really, really deep in the Earth's crust. And how they came up to the surface for us to mine them was a volcanic eruption. So let's take that to our
Wow.
lives. For me, in my marriage, there was a volcanic eruption that led to me having to get to a place of making the decision to divorce. There were several eruptions, but nonetheless, the diamonds came to the top. So I'm going to therapy, and in therapy, she had to tell me, "You're not your mother." And she told me to say it. And I was like, "What are you talking about? I'm come from her, I'm her kind of thing." And she's like, "No, you're not your mother." So that was a diamond that, I had to dig to get. And then as I continued to go through therapy, learning on my own, and taking action was me mining diamonds. So I had to still, when you mine diamonds, again, you have to dig deep. There are other explosions to get into the ground to get to the diamonds. And then you
Mm.
pull those diamonds out of the ground and you take them to a processing plant. And they go through this stage where they go through a slurry to begin to get off some of the dirt and grime that it's around them. And diamonds are found in igneous rock, which is a result of volcanic activity. So it goes through this slurry, and then it goes through this machine that's an X-ray machine, right? So diamonds are heavier than any of the ground that it's contained with. So, and they reflect and refract X-ray light. So this machine like weighs them and begins to separate out the non-diamond rock from the actual rough diamonds, right? So for me, that was separating off emotions. By processing through emotions, that separated my emotions from the lesson that's in that diamond, that rough diamond, right? So after it goes through that, it then goes to people that separate the diamonds to figure out like clarity and different things like that. Not clarity, but just the
Quality.
measurement of them, quality. Yes, thank you. So then it goes from there to, and that's just rough diamonds. Okay. So then it would go to either like a processing plant to make jewelry, or put it into drill bits to mine oil or dentistry or something like that, or even healthcare. There's diamonds in healthcare items as well as skin creams. So I'm going to talk about the diamonds, the process for diamonds to be cut into jewelry. Okay. So in that process, there's cutting. The only thing that can cut a diamond is another diamond. That's it. So there's oil that is also added to that mix. But even before cutting, they examine that diamond and say, okay, what can we get out of this diamond? It's a rough diamond. So what can we get out of it? There was one diamond, one rough diamond that was so big, they were able to get 67 diamonds out of it. Okay. And they took their time measuring it, analyzing. And that's the thing that we have to do as well. When we pull these diamonds up out of the ground, we have to say, what is it that we can learn from this? What's the value? What can I cut out? What can I make out of this and send to someone else? And then in order to cut it, you have to get another diamond and rub it against that other diamond to shape it. And I'm just sitting here mind blown. Iron sharpening iron, right? Now
Hey,
it's a
oh
knife.
man, that just popped in my head. That popped in my head, and then everything you're saying, I'm like, I'm saying to myself, I hope they're catching what she's putting down. I hope they're grabbing hold to. It's a scientific thing, but I hope they're grabbing hold to the message
It's
and the lesson here.
it is life. It is relatable to life. So please go to my website. Um, Check out my Instagram, because I try to explain this and break it down a little bit more. And that is also what my coaching program is about. Because there are so many explosions, right? I call it my C4 process, because you know C4, it's an explosive.
Mhm.
So there are actually it's a 4C process in order to understand what it is that we need to do for our lives to get to a place where we are not stuck and being pity, or stuck in our feelings, or blaming other people, or comparing ourselves to someone else. Not worth it. It's better to understand what it is we feel, understand what it is we allow to happen, and become aware of ourselves. Because so many times, I know as people, we are taught to be selfless. And the greatest commandment says to love God, to love your neighbor, and to love yourself. We put loving ourselves at the bottom, thinking that that should be last. But in this process of going through and getting this divorce and now recovering from it and now thriving, I had to see that I actually had to love myself first. Because if I knew how to love myself, then I could love people better and appreciate them better. And that in and of itself was a diamond sharpening a diamond at that point, because it was God's word, diamond, sharpening me and cutting away the parts that were not necessary so that I could begin to shine bright like a diamond and refract the brightness and the brilliance of
Mm.
everything that I've been through. Because to say, okay, I was parentified, I was abused by my dad, I saw my dad abuse my mom, I moved every 3 to 4 years, I had three miscarriages, both of my parents are now dead, um, and I've been in the divorce process. I've been to court 3 times. Once for the divorce and twice for modifying custody. Okay. Been through that 3 times. Court 3 times. Had to go to a food bank to get um food. I needed to do that. Cried about that. But then I had to find a house. Then I didn't make enough money to get the house. All of those things, like all of that is like dirt and stuff that's surrounding a diamond,
Oh,
right?
so good.
Okay. The diamond is even in that process. As I went and got the food from the food bank, a woman told me, "You're not going to be here forever. You're not doing this forever, right?" I was like, "Oh, new perspective. No, I'm not doing this forever. This is only temporary. I can accept this help with pride, head held high, and not feel less than just because I need help." That was a diamond. Then realizing I don't know what I don't know. So going to therapy and figuring out, oh no, you're not your mother. These are what your emotions are. And it's okay to express them and feel them and go through them. Another diamond, feelings, tell me something. Tell me something about me, diamond. Then, then in going through the custody situations multiple times, I'm learning about the whole legal system and what the court looks at and what they don't look at. And I'm just like, none of that makes any sense to me. But okay. So I'm learning through this whole entire process. And instead of being weighed down by it all, I am saying, hey, um, I can take what I'm learning and share it with others so they can reach my level and go be better than me, please. Faster than what I did. As I said, I'm at this place at 3 years. Hey, if you guys come and get coaching for me, hopefully you get it in one. Doesn't matter. Main thing is keep moving. Come talk to me. I will serve so that you don't get stuck.
This is so good. This is so good. And you know, I was sitting and I'm listening to this conversation. And I'm gonna throw this out there because people probably say, well, Vera, you're a coach. You got another coach? Yes, because there's enough troubled people to go around for all of us. And my niche is different than Elle's niche. And I teach on different things. I do, but I'm not. I God hasn't called me to specifically say, "Hey, I'm just going to hang out with single, divorced
Yeah.
parents." Been
Yeah.
there, done that. I have been there and done that. And like I said, boy, where were you when I was going through? Because I went through a hard time for a while, but the Lord lifted me out, um, but I didn't have the support system. I did have a support system. I had my spiritual leaders were a support system, but then I had some people, that was saying, "Why you leave? You don't want to go back?" And I'm like, "You go." I heard the voice of the Lord so clearly, but all
Mhm.
this that you're saying about becoming that diamond and lifting up and coming out of the trauma and a lot of things. And I do agree too. That's something that the Lord had to teach me over these past years, because I've been through, people wonder why we smile. It's not because
Yeah.
we think we're better or that we have arrived somewhere, but because we have learned. We have learned. And when you were talking, I don't know if you saw my face when you said about the food bank, because um, sometimes people will look at you. You look absolutely beautiful, beautiful, amazing.
Thank
Or
you.
they'll look and they'll see, oh, all those books on the background and all those things. I've had them for years. It's nothing new. When I met my husband, he was an avid reader. So by the time we joined him, we had a whole bunch of books. But
Yes.
sometimes people will look at the outward, right?
Hmm.
And they have no idea your history or your story or what you've gone through. And I'm listening to your story about, I remember when I went through the food bank and people were thinking, you know, and I thought to myself, hey, but you know what? I had to turn it around just like you did. And I had to say, well, God, I thank you that the food bank was there, because
Yes.
what if it wasn't and I couldn't eat? It was a time that we were in two different areas before we can completely transition to one household. And I was out of work for a very long time, moved to Dallas and was out of work for so long. And they kept saying, oh, you come to Dallas, you can get a job right away. Well, that didn't happen.
Hmm.
And my husband was trying to cover two households. And then my daughter wasn't working at the time. So it was like all of us are grown adult people, but he was in New York and we were here, and it was a lot. And people say, oh, you'll tell that story? Yes, because I know where the Lord brought me from. He
Right.
brought me from that point and whatever I went through to now, where we are now. And I don't have everything that people think I have, but I'm just blessed. But it's the story that you're saying, that I could have stayed negative. I could have stayed with my head down. I could have stayed sad, but what would that have gotten me? And you say, why people say, why you smile? Well, ever since I met you, like I said, you've been smiling.
Yeah.
When I met you, we had such an awesome weekend on our trip where we all met, all of us professional coaches and speakers. That's where we met at an engagement. But there, you were the same then. You're smiling, smiling. And it's because of what you said, finding and becoming that diamond in the midst of it. If you had to, I'm going to put Elle's website here so that anybody that wants to reach out to her, I'm going to put that up there. Please do reach out to her, because I believe what she's been sharing tonight about changing your perspective, changing how you personally think, getting the help and support. And that was another huge factor. You said that sometimes we've come up with the idea that you don't talk about it, you don't say anything about it, you just swallow, but that's not getting that therapy. I've had quite a few mental people come on the show and talk about mental health. So you're just putting the icing on the cake to say we need to get the help. There's nothing wrong with getting the support and the help you need. But I know, Elle, that I know there are going to be some women that say that, look, I need to reach out to her. She seems like she is thriving, and her life has changed around. And you might say that you're still in the thick of things, but when you can look at your face and see that you've changed and you're doing, and your perspective is totally different, someone needs to have that same perspective. So, guys, I put her contact information. That's her Instagram. That's her website, as well as I think your Facebook as well, isn't it?
Yes. Yes. So Instagram and Facebook is without the .com, but yes.
Okay. But that's how you can reach out to Miss L. L, we have probably about 5 or 6 more minutes. And I would love for you to say, what would be your biggest advice or your greatest point of advice for women, or just single parents? Because, we have single dads that are bitter. Like, she
Yes.
left me and but what would be your single, not, you don't have to say single. What is some advice that you would love to share with our listeners and say, one, the first step you took? I know you said you did therapy, but what is one thing you say, please do this. If you do nothing else, do this. And then some other advice you want the audience to know.
Okay. Yes. So as a speaker, coach, and author, um, what I speak and coach about is leaning in, learning, and leveling up. that is what I did. I leaned into my situation and I took accountability for what it was that I allowed. And then by allowing that, I said, okay, well, what do I need to be aware of? What is it that I need to learn and be aware of?
Mhm.
And then as I learned and became more aware of myself, I decided I'm going to level up and take different actions. So in leveling up and taking those different actions, I'm like, okay, this is good for me. And I would begin to assess, like, hey, did those actions give me the results I needed? Do I feel better? Do am I approaching my life differently from a place of um, acknowledging and accepting the things that happen without being bitter or feeling less than, and knowing that I am more than enough. So recognizing my own value in those places of vulnerability is what I've been doing. And that's what I would advise people to do. And if they want someone to serve them in that capacity, please reach out. It with me. So you can go through my C4 process, because that process gets you is helps us go through the cycles and recognize, like, oh yeah, I've achieved in this area. Well, great. That's fantastic. Don't forget about it, because guess what? It's going to come back around again. And you're going to every it's like in school. You go to first grade and then it gets built upon second grade until you get through college. That's the same thing with life. There are definite levels to this, which is why I say level up. That is something that we definitely have to do. So we lean in, learn, and level up. Those are the things that I advocate in my program, and I not only in my program, just life period, because that's what my parents taught me. They, I'm a fighter, um, and I recognize, and I've been told, like, when I started going back to church, um, the people in the church, they said that they saw a cloud over me, that it was noticeable. But when I went through that divorce process, they said my face got lighter and I was shining. I was glowing. And I was like, oh my goodness, to hear that kind of feedback from perfect strangers who did not know me whatsoever, but they said that my countenance changed. But not only that, I went to the grocery store. The grocery store that I had been going to when I was married, I would go in, walk, do my thing, cashiers would check me out. After I made the decision, I was still living in the same house, but after I made that decision to get a divorce, they were like, "Oh, look at you." And I'm like, "Wait a minute. Well, I've been coming here for years. What are you saying? Look at me." So there is also a physical aspect, because when we are heavy on the inside, it shows on the outside. And it's necessary to get out of the stress, because it does impact our health, um, and things like that. Because I ended up having to get surgery, um, because of some of the emotional trauma that manifested in my body. So grief is a real thing. There's
Yes.
processes to it, and it's okay to admit that you're going through grief, because I had to grieve the death of both my parents, grieve the death of moving so much, grieve um, getting a divorce, grieve having to deal with going to the loss of finances for having to pay an attorney so many damn times. So many darn times. Sorry.
Right.
Ah, anyway, but nonetheless, you can still come out smiling.
Yes.
And that other person, they deserve to have a relationship with the children too, regardless of what I my relationship with them is. They deserve to be in relationship with our children. And I say our children, even though we're not divorced, even though we are divorced, I still say our. Um, some people are like, why is she saying our? Are they still connected? No, we're not connected like that. Um, but the truth is they are our children, and
Exactly.
our children have two homes because our family was restructured
I love
from
it. I love
from the
it.
children's perspective. So divorced single parents, um, just let me know. You've got my website, you've got
Yes.
my Instagram, where you can see my reels and what I've been saying thus far. And we can have some conversations. Because on my website, I do have an intake form if there are people who are interested. And if you go to my website, there is a free gift.
Ooh, that's awesome. I send somebody so they can get free gift and send it to me. I'm only
Yes.
kidding. Uh, but I just everybody, I have just had enjoyable night sharing with my friend Elle, and I do follow her on Instagram, so that's why I was able to stay in contact. I do follow her on Instagram. Follow her. I've been listening to your messages and different things, and I'm just so thankful that you came on tonight to share a piece of your story and what you do to help, because there are more of us needed out there to help people, to help individuals, and help people get down the road. And like we said, there people don't need to be stuck. We're dealing with a mental health crisis in this nation as it is. And if we have individuals like you, like myself, like the hundreds of women we know that are out here trying to make a difference in the lives, that, instead of us coming up and then keep walking by, but we've come
Right.
up and now we want to pull somebody else up with us and say, hey, we're here to help you come out. So if you are a divorced single parent and you want to really come out of it, like on the other side, like roses, not saying it's going to be perfect, but able to live a life that is not negative and not downtrodden, but have know how your family has been restructured and
Yes.
learn how to reframe. I love the way you reframed your conversation and your thinking. And, I'm sure your children are blessed by that. So thank you so much, friend, for coming on. And again, she has her website, she has her Instagram, her Facebook. You can hit her up. And if you go to the website, she said there's a free gift. Now, just don't everybody flood her website and try to get free gift. It's for those I believe that's going to do the intake who really need the help. We want you to go. And if you don't need the help, but you've listened to this broadcast, please, and you know someone that needs the help. You got that girlfriend that's calling you up wine and say, girl, go to this lady's website. I
Yeah.
listened to that on Tuesday Talk Live. This is Vera Sadler with my guest LJ, and from LJ Enterprise Solution, from and me, Vera Sadler from VLS Coaching, and I will be back with you next Tuesday on Tuesday Talk Live.
Thank you, Vera. Walk in
You're
your power.
welcome. Thank you.